Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Google Digital Garage. It looks like my slides aren't on the screen at the minute, which I'm sure we'll get that sorted in a second. While we're waiting for the slides to come up, I'll introduce myself and introduce the session. So my name is Zoe. I'm one of the trainers for the Google Digital Garage. Fabulous. There's my slides. Amazing. And I'm going to be taking you through building engaging presentations today. Today, we're going to be looking at all the different ways you can create a presentation that's going to engage your audience, that's going to get your message across, and that's really going to empower you to feel more confident in all kinds of sort of public speaking. A little bit of background on me. So like I said, my name is Zoe. I'm one of the trainers for the Google Digital Garage, which is Google's free digital skills training program. I've been doing this job for about 5 or 6 years now. And in addition to that, I've worked in the field of marketing for nearly 10 years now. Gosh, that makes me feel old. And during that time, presenting ideas is a big part of that. Telling stories is a big part of that. In a lot of ways, you don't get anywhere unless you can present your ideas effectively and in a way that's going to engage your audience. So I'm going to hopefully share some of your expertise, some of my expertise even, with all of you today. I'm not doing it alone, of course. I'm also joined by Tessa. Tessa is our moderator for today. And what that means is that if you have any questions or any comments, or if you would like a link to something that I'm talking about, all you need to do is go into the live chat. Tessa is there in the chat, and she's going to be chatting to you all, answering your questions, asking some questions of you, and sharing helpful links if there's anything that I mentioned, like an online tool or something. So if you'd like to interact with Tessa, if you'd like to ask questions, and we do recommend that you do so, this is obviously an interactive session. All you need to do is log into your YouTube account or sign up for one if you don't have one, which only takes a few seconds to do, and then pop into the live chat and say hi. And then anytime you have a question, you can ask Tessa, and we also have some question breaks throughout the session where I can answer anything that's maybe a little bit detailed, because Tessa's only got, I think, 200 characters to reply to things, so it can be a little tricky if there's a complicated answer to something. Brilliant. So in terms of housekeeping, the only other thing I'd like to mention is that we do have plenty of other sessions available as part of the Google Digital Garage. They are all going to be in the link that is in the video description, which takes you to all of our webinars. We've got loads of webinars. They're all on a bunch of different topics. They're all completely free, just like this one. And they are available to anybody who signs up for them. So please do take advantage of those. So today we've got three main sections to this presentation and three main objectives. We're going to be looking at how to craft your approach to presentations, to think about, why do you do a presentation in the first place and how should you be approaching them? Then we're going to look at the actual practical tips of creating those presentations. And then we're going to be thinking about essential presentation skills. And remember, we're doing this as a presentation. I'm delivering this as a presentation to you lot. So you should be able to spot a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about today are part of what's being delivered to you today as well. So hopefully you'll be able to see some of the tips that we're recommending actually in practice coming from me today. Just before we go any further, I'd just like to mention that we do have free career certificates available from Google. So if anybody is looking to get into a new career or improve your skill set, these are free 6-month courses that enable you to learn a brand new skill or supplement the skills that you already have. We've got certificates available in IT support, project management, data analytics, UX design, and I think digital marketing and e-commerce. All of these are 6-month courses, but they're about 10 hours a week, so you can do them alongside your job or alongside any study or any other work that you have going on. And at the end of that, you will get a certificate, a certification that you can then obviously pop on your CV. So do take advantage for those. They are available to anyone. They're just based in the UK at the minute for the link that's been shared in the chat. But they are really great ways to boost your career and move to the next step in your professional life. So I have a question for everybody here. What is the most memorable presentation that you have experienced? And Obviously, share your answers in the chat. We do have a little bit of a delay between me speaking and then you hearing me. So it might be if I ask you a question that I end up moving on before I get any answers. That doesn't mean that I'm not interested in your answers, and I will obviously read them out when I get to them. But because of the slight time delay, I don't obviously want to be sat here just waiting for people to answer. So we will be moving on a little bit, potentially a little bit fast. But please do answer the questions. It would be lovely to hear from all of you. And you'll note as well, the question there is not what's the best presentation you've experienced. It's what's the most memorable presentation you've experienced. I had a really memorable presentation that I went to see. I paid to see this. This was a presentation that I went to see for fun. And it was a presentation on true crime. I've got a friend who's really into true crime, and I thought it would be nice to go along with her to this presentation on something very grim, like the motivations behind serial killers or something like that. And it was memorable for me because it was awful. It wasn't delivered really well. It wasn't delivered memorably. Given that it was a paid, and I think that's probably part of it, that I paid to be there, I was expecting something better. But what I got was 2 hours long of basically someone with a bunch of slides with bullet points on, and he just read the bullet points. And at that point, I did think, well, anybody here could do that presentation. This person, who is delivering it, supposedly has some expertise. Supposedly he's an expert in this area. But actually, it would have been a better use of my time if he'd just given me the slides and I could have read them through at my own time, because he wasn't adding anything to that presentation. So it was memorable for me for the wrong reasons, because it was such a bad experience that I had, again, paid money for. You can probably tell I don't love paying money for things if I don't get a good deal out of them. I can see that Revity has said Apple's launching new products. Yeah, they're really good at that kind of thing. They're really good at building hype for their new products. And that is a memorable presentation because it is a good one, because it's theatrical. It's got loads going for it. It's not just somebody sat up on a stage reading slides. There are more elements to that make it theatrical, that make it cinematic, that make it entertaining. So that's a great example, Revity, of a presentation that's memorable, but hopefully for the right reasons. So I want us to think about that as we go through, what makes these presentations memorable? Why are they memorable? We'll come back to that in a little bit, but first, let's have a think about why we present in the first place. So there are 3 main reasons here that we've got on this slide: communication, persuasion, and interaction. Basically, your progression, your career is going to depend on how you're able to deliver your own ideas. It's going to depend on what's in your mind. But nobody knows what's in your mind until you speak it or write it down. And the more memorable and the more engaging you can be when you explain your ideas, the more likely people are going to jump on board with them. Perhaps we've all worked with somebody who's had great ideas, but they've been really quiet and not very good at delivering these presentations. And as a result, those amazing ideas don't get picked up upon. It's perhaps a little unfair that, so much of progression is determined not by how talented you are necessarily, but how good you are at communication. But that's why we do these presentations. It's why we do these training sessions, to learn how to develop this, because it is a skill. And like any skill, if you do it more, if you practice it, you will get better at it. So I'm not here today going, your career depends on your ability to present, and that's just something you're good at or you're not. Because that's not the case at all. If you're sitting here thinking, well, I'm really bad at public speaking, you don't have to be. Because again, it is a skill. You can practice it. You can learn it. The same with any skill. And you can become better at it. Nobody is born good at public speaking. Everybody learns it and develops it over time. I'm going to show you an example of a presentation now. It's just a quick one. It's from somebody called Nilofer Merchant, and it's a TED Talk. It's only about a minute long, and I want us to think about what makes this a good or bad presentation. You might think this is terrible, but I think this is an example of a good presentation, and I want you to think about why. So let's watch this video. I can tell that I've just been told we've got no video on that audio. Sorry, no audio on that video, annoyingly. Sorry about that. I'm not sure why that's not coming through. I think rather than me setting everything up all over again, I think we'll just skim past this one, which is unfortunate. But what I can do is I can, in fact, if Tessa would mind popping into the presentation and getting the YouTube link to that video and popping that in the chat, and then people can watch that in their own time. Sorry about that. Sometimes the technical aspects of these presentations don't quite work. One of the downsides of doing it all over the internet. But yeah, hopefully we can get the YouTube link over to you. I'll pop that in the pop that over to Tessa right now, and then you'll be able to watch that in your own time. So, moving on from that a little bit, the thing that we want you to think about when it comes to presentations is not that you're delivering a presentation, but that you're telling a story. Now, when you watch that Nilofer Merchant presentation, you'll see the way that she delivers what she's trying to get across, the way that she talks to the audience. It's not going off slides. It's not reading out bullet points. All it is telling a story. Just like I am right now, I'm talking to you, and I am using these slides, but really, I'm talking you through a story. I'm talking you through something with a structure. And that's really good because we're great at telling stories. Human beings love telling stories, and they're so much more interesting than just facts. I could sit here and I could say the Titanic set sail from Liverpool in 1912 and it hit an iceberg and then it sank on its way to America. Those are all facts, I think. I don't actually know where the Titanic set sail from. I might be wrong about that. But I think those are all facts. But they're not going to be as engaging as the movie Titanic, which delivers those facts, but does it in the form of a story. That sticks with you. That makes you feel what's going through the characters' minds. So, how do we turn our presentations into stories? Here are some ideas for basic story types. Now, you will almost certainly have seen tons and tons and tons of stories just like this one. So we've got to start with an origin story. I started my marketing business with a laptop in my garage, and now I have workspaces in 30 countries across the world. Loads of stories that we tell are origin stories. Think about superheroes. Loads and loads of superhero films out at the minute. A lot of them deal with this kind of origin stories. How does a normal person get to be Batman or Spider-Man or something like that? Where do these superheroes come from? What challenges did they face that led them to become who they are now? That's an origin story, and that can be the same thing for you. Again, we started our marketing business with a laptop in my garage. That's the challenge that we're starting with that we need to overcome. We could look at it as a future vision, so just looking into the future instead of the past. My marketing business is growing, and my goal is to have offices in 30 countries worldwide. Where are you going to be in 10 years' time, 5 years' time, 1 year's time? Where are you going to be? What are you going to have achieved? Frame your story like that. There's the failure or success story. My first couple of attempts at starting my business failed as I didn't have the right target market. I learned from my mistake and now have offices in 30 countries across the world. It's often not a failure or success story. It's a failure and success story. And pretty much any big blockbuster film or any really good book that you absorb, that you interact with, has a failure and success story. The heroes never succeed straight away because that wouldn't be interesting. That would be a really quick film. The heroes have to face a challenge and they fail. They don't succeed straight away, but they learn from their mistakes. They learn from whatever happened to them, and they use that learning to succeed in the end. That's if you once you have that in your mind and you watch most blockbuster films, you'll see that story structure. I started something, but I failed. So I learned why I failed and I used that knowledge to succeed. Again, really common story structure. And then there's the realization story, the eureka moment. I'd been in the finance industry for 15 years when I went to a talk on marketing strategies and I realized that eureka moment, that light bulb going off on the top of your head, that I wanted to start my own marketing company and expand into many different countries across the world. How many countries? My bet would be 30. That is the again, it's the sort of the story of how you discovered something, of what led you to go, hang on, things could be different. There are tons of other story types. I really recommend there's a presentation by an author called Kurt Vonnegut. And he does a presentation on story structure as graphs. I know this sounds really dull, but it's really engaging. And what he does is he graphs out the main character's happiness over time, and he shows how the different story structures go. Where the different characters, they start off happy, but then they get sad, and then they end up happy again. Or maybe they start off happy, but they lose something, and then they lose something else, and then they lose something else, and that's a tragedy. It's another way of looking at these things, but you can use these in your presentations. And think about how you would do that in different types of presentations. A budget report. What kind of story structure would you use for that? Well, maybe that's a failure and success story. We didn't do great financially, but we realized why we didn't do great financially, and so we were able to bounce back. Maybe it's a future vision story. Maybe you're going, right, here's what our budget looks like now. Here's what it's going to be in next year. A company update, well, that probably is going to be future vision. Or it maybe is going to be, again, failure and success. An idea pitch is probably going to be a realization. I was walking down the street and I realized there was this product that we could all use. There's all sorts of ways that you can structure your presentations, even if you think they're really dry, really dull. Again, a budget report's not the same thing as a blockbuster movie exactly. Not as many people are going to be entertained by it, but we can still use the same structures. We can still go, okay, well, this is a failure and success story, so I'm going to frame it like that. What happened? Why did we fail? What did we learn? How did we use that knowledge to succeed? It's going to be much, much more engaging than just, here are the numbers. You can also think about what the goal of the presentation is, and you should have that in your mind throughout when you're creating this presentation. So our goal today, or my personal goal today actually, is slightly different. So the goal of this presentation is to get you all to learn how to build your own engaging presentations. But I've got a sort of a secret goal. My goal personally is to get you to feel confident about your ability to deliver presentations, because I think that's a lot of what goes into it. So as I'm delivering this, I'm thinking about that goal. I'm thinking, right, how do I frame this so I can help people feel confident about their abilities? You might have already spotted me doing that already. But whenever we create the presentations, we should be thinking about that goal every single step of the way. And when we deliver it, we should be thinking about that goal as well. And a good way to come up with that goal, what do you want them to think? What do you want your audience to think at what point during the presentations? What's the one thing you want them to take away from that presentation? Because you have to assume they're not going to absorb everything. Very few people are going to absorb every single part of your presentation. Most of it is going to go in one ear and out the other. Not because people aren't paying attention or they're not trying to learn. It's just that's how human beings are. It's not easy for us to absorb information straight away. That's why we repeat things and practice things. So you have to assume that most of your presentation actually isn't going to get taken away by your audience. So you have to think, right, what's the one thing I want them to take away? What's the most important thing from this presentation I want them to take away? And again, frame your presentation around that. When do you want them to feel? There are all sorts of emotions we can bring in. And emotion is great because you know what? We remember emotions more than we remember facts. You know, we don't think, at the end of Titanic. I've never seen Titanic. I don't know why I'm bringing it up as this example constantly. But at the end of Titanic, I'm vaguely aware it's sad, right? We remember that it's a really sad ending, that it plays on our emotions in that way. We don't just remember the facts. We don't remember it because we're thinking, oh, well, Jack and Rose are floating on a door after the Titanic sinks. We remember it because it makes us feel something and our brains latch onto that. So we do need to think about emotions. How do we use them? A really common one in presentations, humor, making jokes, things like that. However, remember there are a time and a place for jokes. This isn't a stand-up comedy session. This is a presentation. You're trying to get facts across. So you don't want to be sort of too jokey. And also remember that there is a time and a place for humor. If you're doing a budget report and you're having to announce that the company's doing really well and everyone's jobs are at risk, that's not the time for humor. You don't want people to think you're taking it lightly. You can also, try and empathize with your audience, try and think about what they might be going through and tap into their emotions that way. I'm sure you're all, if again, we're delivering this budget presentation, we're telling everyone that their jobs are at risk. I'm sure you must be scared right now. I'm sure you must be worried about the future. I just want you to know that we're going to try our hardest to make sure no one's jobs get lost. But we need to be prepared for the future. Empathizing with them is going to help it be more memorable. It's going to help it have more impact. And again, what's the one thing you want them to take away? Remember, they might not be able to absorb every part of your presentation. So what's the most important thing that you're trying to get across, and make sure that's what they take away from it. When we talk about the sort of the structure and the flow of presentations, there's another way of looking at it. Again, there are a million different ways of looking at story structure. We've got the background, the problem, the solution, and the conclusion. So the background, if we're talking about a budget presentation, it's where did we start out at the beginning of the financial year? How was the company doing? How much money were we making? How many people did we employ? What were our outgoing costs? Things like that. But another way to look at it is, again, look at it in terms of your favorite film. So I really love Star Wars. Bit of a nerd. But I love Star Wars, one of my favorite films. The background is the starting information. We've got a galaxy at war. There's an evil empire. There's a princess. There's a little farm boy called Luke. That's the starting building blocks. We need to introduce all of those, because once we introduce them, we can get to the problem. The problem being, oh no, the Empire has got a Death Star. We tend to not really care about the problem until we understand the background. If I just started the film by going, the Empire's got a Death Star, no one would really care at that point, because we've not introduced the characters, we've not introduced the stakes. It's only by setting up the background that we really start to care about these people, and we go, oh, I like Luke Skywalker. He's a lovely little man. And then we find out, oh no, the Empire's got a Death Star, and we start getting worried. Oh, I don't want Luke Skywalker to get hurt. He's my favorite. So we need the background to get to the problem. The problem then has a solution. The solution is we blow up the Death Star. And the conclusion is happily ever after. I've spent a lot of time talking about the background and the problem there because I think they are the most important parts. We need to set up the stakes. The solution can be that often is the weakest part of the story. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's the strongest part. Sometimes it's really dramatic and engaging. But it only becomes engaging if we've got a really good background and a really good problem set up. So the start of your presentation is really important for that. Is really compelling people from the beginning, telling them, here's why you should care about this. Here's why this is important. And of course, underneath that, we've got the simple way that we go about creating the presentations. We'll look at that more in a second. Research, plan, and then design. design comes last. Before you even start opening up PowerPoint, before you start creating any slides, we research, we work out, right, what is it that we're trying to tell people? What facts do we need? Then we can start planning it out, right? How are we going to do this? What's our story structure going to be? Only once you've got a good idea of that can you then go to the slides and go, right, I'm going to design some slides that fit with this. And remember, it's okay if there are no slides. The best presentation I've ever seen was a history lecture I went to at university. It was really engaging, but the person who delivered it didn't use any slides at all. You don't need slides. They can be really useful, but they're not 100% necessary. And remember, we're not just telling a story in general, we're telling a story for our audience. If you know who your audience is, tell the story for them. Personalize it a little bit so that they feel seen, so that they feel acknowledged. We've got our first question break now. It doesn't look like we've got any questions that are about the audio that didn't come through, annoyingly. Very sorry about that. Hopefully you've got the YouTube link now. Thank you, Tessa, so much for sharing it. So we'll move on to the next stage, but if you do have any questions at any point, just pop them in the chat. And the next part is building those presentations. You know, we know why we're doing it. We know what we're putting in our presentations. So how do we go about actually creating them? The tools you use are going to depend on three things. Firstly, the audience. How big is the audience? So if you're delivering a presentation to 100 people, maybe you don't want to do breakout exercises where they all split into groups and discuss something, because that's going to be really, really hard to do. On the other hand, if you're presenting to 15 people, yeah, that's a great opportunity to split them into groups and get them discussing things, because that's going to be nice and easy to do. We just split them into 3 groups of 5. Okay, you 5 are together, you 5 are together, you 5 are together. Go off, discuss it. What about the message you're trying to convey? Yeah, is it something that needs visuals? Is it something that needs a video? Is it something that needs sound to be played? And also, what tools and technology are available? Are you delivering this presentation face to face? Are you doing it online? You know, things like that. Again, really important to get those understood before you choose what tools you're going to use. You don't want to commit to go, right, I'm going to use a PowerPoint presentation, only to find that you're delivering somewhere where there isn't a slide, isn't, what's the word I'm looking for? A projector. There's no way to display your screen. So you've created those slides for nothing. So make sure you understand those 3 things first before you commit to anything. Again, you might not use slides. You might only use 1 or 2 slides. This is quite a slide-heavy presentation. We've got a lot of information to get across, and we've got a lot of visuals that we want people to see. So we're using a slide basically to underline each point. If you're doing a shorter presentation, you might be able to get away without slides at all. Again, that Nilofer Merchant presentation that is linked in the chat, that's a really good example of a presentation with no slides whatsoever that's still really engaging. So before we start with actually creating slides, if you do want to use them, there are other tools available. So here are some examples. So Mural, Canva, and Slido. Slido is a really useful one because it's an interactive element. So you can set up Slido, and then basically anybody who has a mobile device or a computer, they can basically scan a code that's on your slide, and they can answer questions. So you can add a sort of an interactive quiz element to your presentation, or a poll or something like that. Canva is a graphic design presentation, graphic design program. It's really good, really easy to use. So it might be that you don't want slides, but you do want a background image. Well, in that case, Canva can be great for that, because it's a really great design tool that lets you design infographics, for example, that you could maybe even put into your slides. Think about what you're going to use. If you are going to use slides, absolutely fine, absolutely great idea. But you need to make sure you're choosing the right tool for those slides. So there are quite a few ones available. We're going to talk about Google Slides today. Obviously, this is a Google presentation. Google is written on my T-shirt. So we're going to go into that a little bit more. But basically, all of these programs work very similarly. So if you know how to use Google Slides, you probably know how to use PowerPoint or Apple Keynote. But Slides is free. It's all in the cloud, so it shares automatically. It's easy for collaborative work. PowerPoint is Microsoft's version. There is a version of PowerPoint that is available for free, but it doesn't have the full features. The paid version does have the full features, and that's a really good program, actually. And as much as we are going to be talking about Google Slides, PowerPoint lets you do a lot more than just Slides does, with things like animations that really help you make your visuals just top notch if you know how to use it. Prezi, Prezi, is a tool that lets you add animations or create animations for your presentations. The only downside of that is it's not free. So you will have to pay for that. And then Apple Keynote as well. Keynote is sort of Apple's version of Microsoft PowerPoint. So they're very, very similar programs. So we're going to look at Google Slides as an example. As I mentioned, Google Slides is entirely on the cloud. We've made this presentation through Google Slides, so you can see that you can create professional looking presentations. Because it's all on the cloud, you can access it anywhere that you can log into your Google account. So you can, you don't have to carry around a flash drive or anything with you. As long as you can get onto the internet, you can log into your Google account and you can find your presentation in your Google Drive. And also you can share it with other people and then they can work on it as well. So if you're working on a presentation with multiple people, you can basically all work on it together. Now, Google Slides comes with a bunch of built-in themes, which you can edit, and I'll show you how to edit them in a second. This is great because you want your presentation to have a consistent visual look and feel. If every slide looks different, is different colors and different fonts, it's going to look really unprofessional. So we do want a single cohesive theme as much as possible. And again, Google Slides comes with a bunch already picked out. There are also, I don't know if you can see, let me get my virtual laser pointer up. There we go. Up here, we've got something called layout. Each of your slides can be given a layout in Google Slides. And that means you can basically say, right, this is a title page. This is a page with 3 columns of text. And those layouts are built into Google Slides, so you don't have to set them up. You just tell Google Slides, right, I want an image here. So I'm going to choose the layout image, and it will give me space to put that image. If you want to edit the theme, you can do this. Now, there is no sound on this video, so I'm not going to get caught out with this one. So you want to go to the master slide. So if you look at the video, we go to slide in the top menu and down to edit master. Once we get there, I'm going to pause it now. The master slide is the slide for the entirety of the presentation. That determines the theme. So basically, whatever the font is on the master slide, that's the font for your entire theme. So we can edit that and we can change it. So here we go. Here's our master title slides. Currently we've got the font Maven Pro, but what we can do is we can change that to Impact. And now all of our titles will be in Impact. So we click the cross, and just like that, all of our titles have been changed to the Impact font. So you can edit anything, the color of your background, the font, the color of your text, things like that. You can edit the layouts so that you can make those themes your own, so that you're not just using the colors that are inbuilt into Google Slides. Our navigation around Google Slides, this might look really familiar. Again, if you've used PowerPoint, it's not that dissimilar from PowerPoint. We've got the title here at the top. You can click on that and change the title, rename it to whatever you'd like. Here we've got the tools for adding little elements to our slides. So we've got text box, image, shape, and line. You can see the shape has got a little arrow there. The line's got a little arrow as well. That means you've got lots of different options beyond just a straight line. You can add an arrow or a curved line or things like that. And then up here, we've got the options for changing the background, the layout, the theme, and the transition animations as well. And then finally, when you're ready to present your presentation, there is a present button in the top right-hand corner. Click that, and you will go into full screen mode, just like we've got right here. Excuse me. So what else should we think about? That's the practical elements of how to sort of get your presentation started. What else do we need to think about when it comes to actually building these presentations? Sorry, I got a bit of a frog in my throat. Well, first of all, we need to think about our title. What are we going to call it? A really good idea is to think about your goal. Remember back in the first section, we talked about the goal of the presentation. Why are you delivering this presentation in the first place? What do you hope to achieve? We want you all to learn how to build engaging presentations. So that's the title of this presentation, Build Engaging Presentations. We could also call it Making Presentations That Stick. That would work too. But we're telling everyone from the start, this is what this presentation is for. This is what we're hoping to achieve with this presentation. Really, really useful thing to think about is having that really impactful title that straight away says, this is what this is for. We need to think about using, now you're probably going to use text. If you've got a presentation, if you've got slides, you're going to want some text on there. But the key thing is you really don't want much text. You kind of want a few simple bullet points. You don't want to be reading off the slides. You notice I've barely read off the slides here. I've used what's on the slide to build into my own points. I've got my notes as well that I can rely on if I need a reminder of like, what's this about? What are we trying to tell people here? But really, most of this is me expanding on the points that the slides have. If you just read the bullet points on the slides, well, what's the point in delivering a presentation? You could just write those bullet points down and email them to everyone. It wouldn't be very engaging if you did that. And that's kind of the point. If we want to be engaging, we don't want people to be reading the slides. While you are reading the slides, you're not listening to me. So if I've got loads of text and you're thinking, right, hang on, I need to read all this, you're not listening to the points that I'm making. And that's so much less engaging because we're actually not very good at multitasking. Our brains can't focus on two things at once very well. So if you're reading the slide and trying to listen to me and your brain is going to want to do that, you're probably not going to absorb either the writing or the speech. So we want as little text as possible. So the focus is on you, the presenter. The slides are not the main thing about the presentation. They are a useful tool to help you out as the presenter. You are the focus though. So always remember that you don't need big flashy slides because they're just there to support your points. They're not the main focus of the presentation. Top tips for the slides. Number one, think about the number of slides. In general, maximum 1 slide a minute. Now I've done more than I did a 10-minute presentation and I think I had 40 slides once. And I knew full well that that was way too many slides. So some of those slides were literally a second or half a second long. They were designed to be quick and impactful, to just quick images to outline my points. And that took a lot of rehearsal to do. It worked, it was great, but it took a lot of rehearsal. In general, 1 slide per minute is your absolute maximum. On average, it takes at least a minute to go through a slide. I would aim for 1 slide every 2 minutes. So if you've got an hour-long presentation, I would aim for 30 slides and no more. Any more than that, you're going to get stuck. You're going to want to, most people, when they start presenting, they want to stop on each slide and go, here is this point. Here's why we've put this in there. Here's what you should learn from it. If you've got too many slides, you're going to want to whiz through some points and just go point, point, point. Here's the thing. Here's the fact. Here's what you should know. Again, that's not the most engaging way of delivering a presentation. But if you've got loads and loads of slides, you're going to have to go through them really, really quickly. So it's way better to shrink the number of slides so that you can spend a decent amount of time on each one. Bullet points, you do want them to be nice and concise. You don't want full sentences, really. You just want quick points. You know, it can even just be reminders for you. That's not ideal. The best way to think about bullet points is these are the basic points that we want you to take away from this slide. Again, think of your goal. Think, what do I want you to take away from this presentation? What do I want you to take away from this particular slide? That's what your bullet points are for. They're telling your audience, here are the main facts. Think about your font. Think about it needs to be legible, it needs to be readable. You can still emphasize bits, you can still use color. Look at how we've done it here. We have not only put the fonts in a nice sort of legible, readable font so you can see what's on the slide, but also we've bolded and put in red the sort of the key words for these bullet points. So we're adding a little bit of a visual flair, so it's not just bullet points and text. The thing is, and this comes into the next 2 points, varying your content and changing your pace. The thing is, your brain is looking for patterns all the time. It's something all of our brains do. It's kind of like a problem-solving thing, is that whenever your brain is looking at anything, part of it is going, is there a pattern here? And if your brain spots a pattern, it can shut off a little bit. It can go, oh, okay, we found the pattern. We've done our work. We've done the job. The job was to find this pattern, and we found the pattern. So we can stop paying attention now. So if we just have all of our font in the same color, our brain is going to go, oh, okay, the pattern is that the font is gray. And it's going to stop thinking about it. And you're going to lose some of your attention. And it's the same with varying your content and changing your pace. If all of these slides had 3 bullet points on, your brain again would go, oh, okay, the pattern here is that there's 3 bullet points per slide. I've worked out the pattern. I can stop paying attention now. If the pace is the same, if each slide is exactly 1 minute long, your brain is going to work out that that's the pattern and it's going to stop paying attention. So we need to vary these things up. Some slides you want lots of bullet points. Some slides you want no bullet points at all. If you can get animations in there, if you can get music in there or audio in there or video in there, change the type of content you're showing and change your pace as well. Some of your slides you want to spend a lot of time on, some of them you want to whiz through. Again, we're trying to stop people's brains from going, okay, there is a pattern here. We're going to want to keep things as varied as possible because that's going to keep people's attention for as long as possible. When you're online, there are some other things you need to think about. So screen sharing, video. Do you want your audience to be able to participate? How easy is it for your audience to sign on to this? So, for example, we've used YouTube Live here. That lets us share our screen, but it doesn't let us have video for our participants. I can't see you. You can see me, but I can't see you. If we were running a more interactive discussion-based session, well, we'd need to use a platform that had video. But we can still have live participation because we've still got the text chat. And it's easy for you all to use. You just need to go to a YouTube link, and it's also free for you all. So we don't need you to buy a program in order to access this. There are, again, other options, other video platforms that you can use. So do we have any questions at this point? I can see actually that we've just had a comment popped into the chat from VV. That you've joined late. Would there be a link to this? Yes. So this presentation is going to be live for about 24 hours at the same link, the same YouTube link. So once this is finished, you can go right back to the beginning and watch it from the start. So yes, there will be absolutely a link to it later. Again, this link will be live for about 24 hours and then it will go down. I think that's all of the questions. Let me just double check. Yep, that's all the questions for now. So we will move on to the final section and potentially the most important section of boosting your presentation skills. Now, this is the bit that most people have a problem with because this is the part where you tend to think, I'm not good at public speaking, and therefore my presentations are going to be rubbish because I'm no good at public speaking. The problem is me. And I have just told you all that you are the focus of your presentations, right? It's not the slides, it's you. And you might be thinking, oh, that's scary actually, because I don't want to be the focus of my presentation because I don't think I'm good at public speaking. I mentioned this before. Public speaking is a skill, and that, like any skill, the more you do it, the more you practice it, the better you will get at it. Nobody is just good or bad at public speaking. Nobody has that set in stone. I used to be terrible at it because I didn't do it. I didn't practice it. And then I got a job that meant I had to. In fact, I think it was at university that I started, going, right, okay, I need to deliver a lot of presentations here. So I need to get better at this. And then I got into my job and I realized I needed to do more presentations. So I needed to get better at it. And now this is my entire job. I deliver presentations. If you're looking at me and thinking, wow, she's really good at public speaking, thank you. But it's not because I was born this way. It's not because this is just something that I'm naturally good at. It's because this is something I've done a lot and I've practiced. And you can do that too. Everybody here can be excellent at public speaking. I'm going to share some tips with you on how you can go about doing that. I want you to think about the kind of presenter you will be. Remember, we talked about memorable presentations right at the beginning. And somebody mentioned Apple and their presentations, and think about the kind of presenters they are. Think about how Steve Jobs used to be, how Tim Cook is, how they're cinematic, they're charismatic. They make everything really sort of dramatic and exciting. That's one type of presenter. There are loads of others. I want you to think about your favorite presentations. Think about the presentations you have watched in the past, and think about what kind of presenters you want to emulate, who you think you can be like. You are going to need to adapt it to your audience. And the main thing you need to think about, how many people are you talking to? But not just that, what kind of people are you talking to? I've done presentations, for example, for university students, tend to be pretty tech savvy. They tend to understand when I talk about Facebook and Twitter and social media marketing, and they understand what TikTok is, and they understand what SEO is potentially. But I've also delivered presentations, the same presentations, to groups that just aren't that technologically savvy, that just don't know that much about tech. So I need to adapt. I need to take everything down to a more basic level so that my audience understands what I'm trying to get across. Now, the number of people you present to can be intimidating as well. We tend to look at a room full of, 100, 150 people, and we think, well, that's terrifying. That's loads and loads of people. The more people there are, the scarier it can be. You are not talking to a crowd, though. You're talking to an individual just 150 times, if that makes sense. So a good tip is pick somebody out of the audience. Don't talk to the crowd, just talk to that one person in the audience. Now, vary that up a little. You don't want to just be staring at one person the whole presentation because they're going to get freaked out. Every slide, maybe every sentence, choose somebody from the audience, look at them and go, here's your point, here's the sentence. And then move over to another person. That way, you're not talking to a crowd. You're just talking to individuals. And we can all do that. We've all talked to individuals before. It makes a difference in your brain. Another thing that some people have is the exact opposite, is when they're presenting online, like I am right now, I'm presenting to nobody. I know that you're all there, but I can't see you. As far as I can tell, I'm just talking to my computer. Now, at first, when I first started delivering presentations online, that was really intimidating. It was really hard. It felt silly. A tip that I found that I really recommend, what I did was I put a photograph of my best friend and her dogs. I put that behind my webcam. So instead of talking to nobody, I was talking to my best friend, somebody who I'm really confident with, really comfortable with. So that's a great way of making that sort of one-to-one, making that presenting to nobody issue go away. Is just have that photograph there so that of somebody that you love, somebody that you're really comfortable talking to, whether it's a partner, a friend, a family member, and then you're talking to that individual. It seems silly, but it's a way of sort of hacking your brain, and it really does work. I can attest to that. So audience participation is something that we do need to think about. Do we want audience participation? And the answer is always going to be yes. You want people talking to you. You want that. because that lets you adapt the presentation to them. You don't want people to feel silly for asking questions, because that way people are going to feel like they're not listened to. And if you don't listen to them, why should they listen to you? So audience participation is really great, really useful. It's a good idea to ask the audience questions. It's a good idea to have that sort of conversation. Even if you've got 150 people, ask them to, put your hands up, everyone who has seen the movie Titanic. Again, not sure why that's stuck in my brain, but I'm just running with it. Then you get a quick straw poll, don't you? People who put their hands up or people who don't. You get an idea of the knowledge of your audience. You don't just want to talk at them. You want there to be some interactivity. Again, this is why we've got these question breaks. This is why also at some points I've asked you questions. When somebody asks you a question, be appreciative, because they are making your presentation better. Might not feel like it. It might feel like they're asking you something really awkward. But if they're asking you a difficult question, that's because it's something they want to know. If somebody asks the question, I guarantee you there will be 5 other people who wanted to ask the question but couldn't pluck up the nerve. So if somebody asks you something, probably a decent chunk of the audience is wondering the same thing. So they are helping you make your presentation better. They're helping you get the right information across to your audience. So thank them for it. Tell them that's a really good question. Thank you for your question. Follow up on the question. Don't just ignore it. Obviously, try and answer it. But it's okay to say, I actually don't know the answer to that one. Maybe you'll know where they can find it. Maybe, okay, I'm actually not sure what the answer to that question is. Thank you for your question. Unfortunately, I really don't know the answer. But I think if you go to this book, I'm pretty sure they talk about it. I run a self-defense class. It's one of my sort of side hustles, my hobbies. I teach people self-defense, and people ask questions all the time that ultimately I can't answer. But I do sometimes know the resources. I know where they can go. I can see, somebody asked me the other day about it was an intersection about your legal rights when it comes to self-defense. And it was a question that I'd never thought of before, and one that I actually didn't know the answer to. But I did know, well, okay, well, I go to this person online when I'm looking for sort of legal tips. So that's the resource that I can point you towards. So even though I don't know the answer, I can help you find the answer. The worst thing you can do is just make the answer up, because you don't want to give people poor information. They might think that you've helped them. They might think that you've been correct. But at some point down the line, they're going to realize you were wrong. And then they're going to doubt every other thing that you've taught them. We don't want that for obvious reasons. When somebody is talking to you, when they're asking you a question or answering a question that you've asked, listen to them actively, talk to them, acknowledge them. You don't want to avoid them. You don't want to just let them talk at you. Have that conversation. Be friendly. Again, remember, any audience participation is making your presentation better, because it's letting you answer questions your audience has. It's letting you tailor the information to what they want to know. So it's really good when they do that. So treat that accordingly. Avoid too much content. Remember, you want maximum 1 slide per minute. You want everything to be tailored to the audience as much as possible. You might not know who your audience is, so you might not be able to tailor that. But if you can tailor your audience, remember, try and pick 3 key things to say for each slide. That's a good starting point. If you've done this for a while, you can choose more, you can choose less. And again, it's good to vary things up so you've not just got 3 points for each slide. So again, we want to avoid patterns, but it can help you think, right, what is it that I want to get across here? Even if it's just one thing, again, remember that one key point that you want people to take away. Having that in your mind for each slide, one key point, is a good way of going in and avoiding overloading people with too much content. And don't forget to pause. It's okay if you're finding that you're rambling a bit or babbling, or if you're finding that you're not sure what to say next, take a pause. See, that wasn't so bad, was it? None of you just completely lost lost interest there, did you? You didn't lose attention because I paused for a second. It was fine. It gave you room to breathe. So pause, take a breath, think about what you're going to say before you say it. Plan it out in your head before you say it. Now we can think about our voice as well. How are we going to talk? What are we going to sound like? Your voice is such a powerful tool. You do need to look after it. My voice is going through this presentation. I can feel it going. I've got a little bit of a cold at the minute. So try and make sure you've got water. Like a fool, I forgot to get water today, and I've only got black coffee, which is not great for your voice. So that's partly why mine is going. But try and make sure you've got water available so that you can keep your throat hydrated. Think of the ways you can use your voice. Volume's a great example. Sometimes, right, if you want to really draw your audience in, you can actually get a bit quieter. It's a bit more serious, isn't it? A bit slower, less dynamic, but you can feel yourself drawing in a little bit. Or we can be loud. We can be big and loud and exciting. We can use the volume of our voice and play about with it to emphasize different points, to avoid those patterns. Again, we don't want monotone. We don't want to spend the entire presentation talking like this in the same tone of voice, in the same volume, the same style, the same pace, because this is a pattern. This is a pattern that your brain can pick up on. And they'll hear that pattern and they'll turn off. That's why repetitive, monotonous voices, that's why they're boring to us, is because our brains go, well, that's the pattern. It's that tone of voice. It's not changing. So we found the pattern so we can switch off. Style as well, tone, pace. Sometimes you'll want to be slow and maybe a bit more serious and maybe pause a bit more. Again, if the points demand it. Sometimes you want to be animated and excited and quick and fast and engaging, and you want to throw points at your audience over and over again. It's all going to depend on the point you're trying to get across. So think about the different ways you can use your voice, varying up the tone, the pace, the volume. Be happy, be sad, be somber, be formal, be excited. Think about how all of those different elements go into that. Your body also is important. You might have heard that 90% of communication is actually nothing to do with the actual words you speak. It's all to do with tone of voice, facial expression, body language. These are the things that we use to communicate more than the words that we use. Think of a really common thing you'll see people who are nervous about presenting, they'll hunch over and they'll look at their notes, or they'll fold their arms, or they'll have it in front of themselves. This is all nervous body language. We're basically, our bodies are, if we feel like we're under threat, we want to curl up in a little ball because we're trying to protect our vital organs from physical danger. And even though we're not in physical danger, our bodies still have the sort of the same instincts of curling up and blocking things off. But that is untrustworthy. It looks like you've got something to hide. We don't want that. We want to be open. If you have your arms crossed across your chest, you're hiding something. You're untrustworthy. You're not confident. If you're open, you're showing people that you're not scared, that you're showing your vital organs for everyone to see, because you're not worried, you're not scared. And people will take that and understand that. You can. This has been scientifically found. You can do a power pose that makes you feel more confident. And it's a good idea to do this at the start of the presentation, maybe sort of behind the scenes, putting your hands on your hips and sticking your chest out. It actually raises levels of hormones that make you feel more relaxed and lowers the ones that make you stressed. It makes you feel stronger. It makes you feel more confident. So try out striking a power pose before your presentations. Be mindful of your stance, your movement. You don't want to be swaying, is a thing that a lot of people do when they're standing up. They sort of shift their weight from side to side. If you find that you do any of these nervous habits, incorporate them. So my partner sways. She's always sort of sway. When she delivers presentations, she shifts her weight from side to side. until I said, like, look, you're doing that. Have you tried walking around instead? And that's much less distracting. Walk around, move about, use your body. You know, if your body is nervous, it wants to move. So let it move. Move your hands, move your feet, but do so in a way that you're conscious of and that you understand, rather than just letting your body do what it wants. And of course, practice everything. The more you practice, the better you will get with it. Practice your presentations in the mirror, film yourself delivering them, and watch them back and see what you did and see if there are things that you could improve. So those are the points that you can think about in terms of delivering these presentations. Adapt it to your audience, think about your voice and your body language, and overall practice, because again, it is a skill and you can get better at it. You might have noticed I'm rushing a little bit because we are almost out of time. I can see that we've got one question that hasn't been answered. Oh, no, it has been answered by Tessa. Yeah, Vivi, the ideal of number of slides ideally is going to be a minute per slide at maximum, or sorry, 1 slide per minute at maximum. So a 60-minute presentation, the maximum number of slides you should aim for is 60, but ideally you want less. I would aim for 1 slide for every 2 minutes of presentation, but it's a bit of a how long is a piece of string. Sometimes you can get away with more, sometimes less. It depends how you're going to use the slides. Cool. So next steps for everybody. Remember, we have got those career certificates available from Google. They are available at the link on the screen, goo.gov/careercertuk. They are free 6-month training programs, 10 hours per week or less. And they can be used to get you into a range of brand new careers. Really worth doing. Apart from that, the only thing I've got left to say is thank you. Thank you for your patience. We have gone over time. I'm very sorry about that. But hopefully it's been useful and worthwhile. If you've got any feedback for us, we've got a feedback link right there on the screen, goo.gov/digitalgaragefeedback. Thank you all so much for your questions. Thank you for participating. Thank you for watching. I really hope you found it useful. A huge thank you to Tessa. I'm sure you agree, Tessa has been a fantastic moderator. She's been there in the chat helping you all out. And that is it from me. So I hopefully will see you all again on another Google Digital Garage session in the future. But for now, goodbye.